friends. How are you? Happy Monday. Happy second to the last day of 2024. We'll get to these in a moment. Ah! Oh, Maru Dim, hello. Thank you so much for your subscription. You got your dancing butterick lady. Hey, guys. All right, Double T, we'll get to these in a minute. You go sit down. So, I know I saw some of you the other night or the other afternoon when Jill and I were on, but it is so good to see you guys for this, again, second to the last day of this year. Let me say hi to everybody. Druid, my dearest. Robin, hi. Happy birthday to your husband. So is he as old as my marriage? Is he 29 too? It's funny. I think I might have mentioned this the other day. Somebody said to my husband and I, oh, it's going to be 29 years, isn't it? And I'm like, 29 years. 29 years. I tend to measure time in I don't know, in milestones, like just general milestones. And I know this probably sounds really stupid, but oh, happy birthday to your daughter, Mara Dim. But I think like I have a friend who I haven't seen in a really long time, and recently I talked to them and I thought, gosh, I haven't seen you in 16 years. And I'm thinking, okay, in the interval between the time we've seen a human being was born and now can drive, or, it's been 20 years or 21 years since we've seen each other. Well, that duration can now vote, buy cigarettes and alcohol. I know that's ridiculous and weird, but it's just the way I think of things. I think 29, my son is 27. So we certainly, incubated and grew a child in those time, in that time. So anyway, so good to see you guys. I hope that your holidays have been good. Mine were good. I think I said the other day, like I just was not into Christmas, and I'm kind of glad it's over. It was really tough this year. I'm very excited to say goodbye to 2024. It started off with a bang. I was like, 2023 was a little crazy. I thought 2024, be cool, man, be cool. And here in the U.S., we of course had the election, and just all of the nonsense with that. And I lost a close family member. Things just sort of spiraled. So I'm really glad that as we're starting fresh. I don't do resolutions. I think we talked a long time about this last year about not doing resolutions, but maybe kind of having a theme and a focus. And so, this year I have a bunch of stuff that I'm working on. I think I'm just embarking on a big project, and it's really funny how, when you decide to do something or you decide to get into something, all of a sudden it's everywhere. Like all of a sudden stuff keeps coming out of, and I can never remember the right name for that. It's a phenomenon. It's like the Baden something, Bader something phenomenon. But it's like the idea of like, you buy a car that you think is really unique. You've never seen, bright green Mini, and then all of a sudden you buy that car and everywhere you see that car, and it's a matter of like where your focus is. But also I just think it's interesting that some of the things I've been thinking about for a while, and that I've decided 2025 is probably the year that I want to do this thing, really focus on this and put together some type of interdisciplinary work. All of these things are suddenly coming up that are making me go, huh. So, yeah, thank you, Druid. The Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. Yes, frequency illusion. I think it's something that we all have suffered from at some point. And, I always say, maybe it's the universe. Maybe it's Bader-Meinhof. Who knows? But I really do feel right now that there's just some stuff coming across my plate that, I don't know, kind of feels like the universe is telling me something. So with that in mind, I had a couple things to show you. And a couple of just, little things to keep in the back of your mind to throw out there. So first of all, Robert Rauschenberg. We looked at, if you are a longtime quilt nerd, you may remember that Mary Fawns talked about Robert Rauschenberg sort of in the scope of, people utilizing quilts, artists utilizing quilts for artwork. I think it was really, it was about this whole discussion of big A art versus little A art, and where does craft come in there, and the hard work and labor of women who go on unnamed, all this stuff. In the 1950s, Robert Rauschenberg was doing, and to kind of roll it back a little bit, if you're not don't have like an art history foundation, Robert Rauschenberg was a very, very, very influential artist coming out of, sort of the postmodernist movement. You've got like Picasso, de Kooning, Pollock, Rauschenberg, and then you have like the pop artists like Jasper Johns, Claes Oldenburg, Andy Warhol, and so you've got this continuum of these artists, and they all kind of influenced each other, and they were all sort of, in this art world, this very heavily white male dominated art world. And so Mary looks at these issues, and I think she's always going to be kind of involved in this idea of art versus craft when she talks about quilts, and I too, that's very important stuff to me. And so anyway, Robert Rauschenberg, he had a really interesting body of work. He had these monochromatic series, which I don't love. And then he had, he did a lot of collage type work, like mixed media type stuff, which I do love. And then he did this series called his Combines. And it's where he took found objects and combine them with painting and other stuff. And some of them is just, he has ones where there are these boxes, which he basically kind of glued together. And like, that's it. And, you look at some of the Dada artists, the artists that, were doing stuff like hanging a toilet on the wall or urinal on the wall and calling it art. And so I think he was kind of creating off of that idea. And so, long story short, Rauschenberg, well, the Combines, what I'm forgetting to say here, the Combines, one of them is called Bed, and it is a banana duct taped to the wall. Yeah. Oh my gosh, you guys, we're going to have to do, so 2025, I know I said I was going to sort of plan better so what topics we're talking about. I will give you an entire week of big A art bitchiness because I have so much to say. And yes, bananas duct taped to the wall is definitely one of them. Anish Kapoor, Banksy, I have so many things to say. But anyway, Robert Rauschenberg, he created this work of art called Bed, and it is a quilt. I believe it was maybe 1955. I could be wrong. It was definitely in the 50s, but so Bed, and it's a, I think it looks like it's like definitely not a bridal quilt, not a like a super nice quilt, but a nice quilt, a quilt that somebody might think looks like a log cabin maybe. And then so the I guess it's on a canvas. The canvas is sort of long and narrow, like a single bed, and the quilt is on it, and then there's kind of all this paint and drippiness at the top, and sort of, you have to look at it. Just look at it and see it. I will show it when we get into big A art discussion. But anyway, I kind of had in my mind, Robert Rauschenberg and that whole, thanks Druid. Yes, it's the MoMA has it. And I've never seen it in person. I don't know if and when they ever have it on display, but it's part of their permanent collection. And I would love to like just get up close to it one day and eyeball the the details. But I saw that, and I minored in art history in school, and I went to art school. My bachelor's degree is in studio art, fine art. And I have a lot of trauma from that, and that plays into all this big A art, little a art, women, men, gender, all that stuff. And so I had always lumped Robert Rauschenberg in there with like the people I named: de Kooning, Pollock, the pop artists. And again, it's a big pile of white men who dominated the art scene. And I think in today's our insular art world, they created what we have today, to some degree. Now that's not to say like all of a sudden this insular exclusivity sprang up in the middle of the 20th century in the United States. Oh no, don't misunderstand. This insularity sprung up long ago. It goes way back, and I don't want to step on other people's research, but one of Mary Fawn's lectures really talks about this idea of the division between art and craft, and when and how that happened, and painters and sculptors kind of how that what they did changed from, say, the Renaissance through today. So anyway, I could digress forever, but I started doing a little bit of a deep dive on Rauschenberg because of Bed, because of that art, that piece. And my mind has changed about him. He was one of the good guys, I think. Knocking on wood here. I knew that he was gay or bisexual. He was married to a woman, but he had intimate relationships with a number of artists. Off the top of my head, I can't remember who all they were. Jasper Johns, I know, was one of them. So you've kind of got some gender and sexuality stuff going on with him, and I think some of that did influence his later work. So we've got that piece of it, and then some of the things he did were really, really, really interesting. He, as a young artist, approached Willem de Kooning and asked him for a drawing, because he wanted to erase it. And this was during the time period that he was doing these monochromatic works. And I've read some snippets from a de Kooning biography where basically de Kooning he understood what Rauschenberg was trying to do, but he was upset kind of by it because he was like trying to find his place above Picasso. And here comes Rauschenberg, this young upstart, in the art world, saying, I want a piece of your work so I can erase it. So, all of the implications there. So that if you want some information on that, look it up. It's I think it's called Erasing de Kooning was the name of the artwork, and it literally is a white piece of paper that's been erased. And apparently de Kooning's choice of the drawing, he didn't just choose like a simple pencil drawing. He chose one that had tons of charcoal and all kinds of media in this sketch, so that it would be really hard for Rauschenberg to erase it. So there were some themes and ideas he was working with that I feel like maybe I never gave him enough credit in art school, when I was just like, oh, he's just another one of like the dudes. He was like the dude. He was like the guy. And his work and his whole being, I guess, kind of stands out among some of these other artists. So anyway, long story short, Robert Rauschenberg. He is some of my focus, early 2025, because of some of the things he did. There is also this very interesting documentary, which I have not seen yet. I have tracked it down. I would love to do maybe a little private viewing of it. Maybe we could do that. What do you guys think of that? It would obviously have to be like on YouTube. We'd have to do like a secret squirrel thing on YouTube because it cannot be broadcast, because of intellectual property and whatnot. And it's a small documentary. It's not like ABC News. It's a documentary, and I would never want to step on their work. So I want to say it's about an hour and a half. So yeah, if that's something you guys are interested in, let me know. I'll set it up so that, we could screen it on a day, that's good for everybody. And I could send out like I said, Secret Squirrel YouTube links to people that are interested. So, so what it's about, this documentary is about. So Rauschenberg was like the it boy. And the Venice Biennale, which is like this every other year art extravaganza in Venice, he won the Venice Biennale in 1964, maybe, I think. I can't remember the exact date, but and there's some suggestion that being the winner, like the top artwork, may have been manufactured. That, it may have been like going in, everybody knew Rauschenberg was going to win. It wasn't one of those, like, it was like an electoral college situation. So I'm really interested to see it. And yeah, I would love for you guys to check that out with me and get your thoughts, because, this is the thing, like, I sometimes feel like I live in a sort of a vacuum with my ideas about art, and I do get a little shouty about it. And I would really love, some other people's thoughts, distancing yourself from this deeply personal thing that gets me all riled up. I don't know if I'm sure I've mentioned it multiple times. I know I talked about it on Quilt Nerd with Mary. Hey, Jill. Long time no see. I love Butterick Lady. There's another one too. There's I don't know if I have it attached to a different subscription or something, but there is another one of those. I don't know if it's Butterick. It might be Simplicity. She's wearing more of like a 70s outfit. So yeah, that's the big focus. And what I was saying, I discussed this on Quilt Nerd a very long time ago, but when I was in art school, I had kind of like I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And the college I went to required 2 semesters of art foundation. And so you had to take drawing, conceptual art, painting and life drawing, like that kind of stuff, like really all the basics, get everybody on the same page so they understand basic design principles and, color theory, all that kind of stuff. So we had to take all these different classes. Excuse me. I think I'm coming down with what my husband has, so we'll see how long my voice lasts. So anyway, this painting teacher, I had to take a painting class, and it was life painting, so naked people. That was challenging enough for an 18, 19-year-old who had not been exposed to life drawing before. So I struggled with this class, and I am not the best drawer, life drawing. I mean, I can draw stuff if I really take my time, I can. It's not photorealistic. I'm not super good with that, but right, Jill. So he says one day, and I had been in sculpture, and I knew I was not going to be a painter, but I really loved the idea of sculpture. And of course, my sculpture professor was this guy. I won't get into everything about him, but my idea was that I was really interested in process as much as, and I still am. I'm as interested in process as much as I am in the finished object. And I thought, with painting, and don't misunderstand, painting is not easy. Making good paintings is definitely a skill. There's technique, working with different types of media. It's not easy. But I was really interested in the extra piece of that. So as an example, like the technique, not just like how do you work with watercolor, how do you work with oil paint, but like how do you create this artist idea, this vision I have, how do you do that with a welding torch? Like I really wanted to learn these like complicated techniques. And so that's why I jumped into sculpture, and sculpture intimidated me so much. And I would say probably one of my greatest regrets is leaving sculpture. However, I did go over to crafts, and that's where I did textile work, as well as I actually spent more time in metalsmithing, silversmithing than I did, but in textile, but I did towards the end of my degree, I did do a lot in the textile studio. So anyway, long story short, this painting teacher one day is just having like it wasn't a critique. It was just kind of his idea of a lecture, I guess. And it's where, we all kind of came into class, and instead of being at our easels, to do the drawings, it was just a lecture. We all sat in chairs around him. And I mean, I could see his weaselly little face to this day. And he makes some kind of comments about how, he has this sort of philosophical differences with the School of the Arts. He felt like the only legitimate schools within the School of the Arts were the School of Painting and the School of Sculpture. All of the other schools, so there was fashion design, there was interior design, and then there was woodwork and carpentry, ceramics, glass. Those things kind of all fell under crafts. There was like some industrial architectural type stuff. And then there was graphic design. And so he kind of poo-pooed graphic design as that, like, well, that's for ads and commercials. Like, that's never going to be art. Nobody really thinks of that stuff as art. Like, good designers, yeah. But he specifically said about craft is that, it's a beautiful thing to make stuff with your hands, decorative, useful objects, but they will never be art. You can make this pretty table. You can, a carpenter can make this pretty table and carve all of it and, da-da-da-da. It's still just a table. And I, again, I'm a very intimidated young, thinking I'm going to be an artist one day. And I just remember sitting there and like I could feel my rage building. I don't think I'd ever felt my blood pressure do this. I never felt such a sense of anger and rage. And, I just remember thinking to myself, like, who the F do you think you are? Now, at 19, I certainly wasn't going to be like, whoa, buddy, shut your face. I got things to say. At 51, I absolutely would be like, whoa, buddy, you little weasel face. Let's stop right there and let's have a conversation about that. And I just, again, deep regrets. That's one of them. I want to go back to 19 years old and sit in front of that weasel-faced painter. I wish I remember his name. I think it was like Peter or Rob or, it's like an ordinary name, but I cannot for the life of me remember his last name. I would be very interested to see what he's doing today, and look at his paintings. And they weren't terrible paintings, but they didn't do much for me. Anyway, I have had that dark, complicated, burning seed of rage in my heart for 30 plus years. And so 2025 is the year that I'm going to jump on that horse and shout about it, very loudly. So, that in mind, I have a couple things to show you. One, our dear friend Kate, and I don't know if she's here, sent me this reel. I think she sent it yesterday, or might have been a couple days ago. No, it was yesterday. So I'm going to show you this. Hopefully I can get it to work. Instagram prefers to be on a phone, not on a computer, but the Instagrammer, her name is Carrie Scott Curates. I imagine a number of you probably already follow her because I think I saw some handles of some friends on there. But she had some interesting things to say, and I'm like, I actually did a remix reel this morning, and I don't think it posted. It said it posted, but I don't think it did. So anyway, I don't know if I will make another one because, as Jill knows, social media and that kind of stuff just, ugh. If I could do it in 5 seconds, which would be great, but I can't. It takes me forever to do these things. So anyway, let's see. Let me jump over here to the other screen. Nope. Okay, I think this other screen, here we go. All right. Okay, let me see if I can. All right, I think it may not. I might have. Oh, thank goodness, Jill. Because when I look in my reels, it's not there. Okay. So I think it started a little bit. I turned the volume, so.
In contemporary art, what was once dismissed as craft, the F word of the art world, it's now kind of stealing the spotlight. Let's talk about fiber-based art. It's a medium historically aligned with domestic, female spaces. For decades, embroidery, weaving, and other fiber techniques were treated as second-class citizens, overshadowed by painting, sculpture, works on paper, photography, almost anything. Some things shifted. At Art Basel Miami this year, fiber was everywhere. From intimate hand-stitched pieces to monumental installations. Honestly, everywhere. What's changed? Is this a case of visionary artists simply paving the way? I kept thinking about Sheila Hicks with her cascading tactile forms, Ellen Atsui transforming found materials into shimmering tapestries, Doho Sue's Stanford Biggers, and even Jeffrey Gibson's beadwork. Biggers. All of them have expanded what fiber can mean in contemporary art. But this trend has reached a crescendo. At Scope, Camp Gallery showcased not one but 3 fiber-based artists. It was a celebration of texture, materiality, and the personal histories embedded in thread. Here's the question I want to ask you. Why do you think the art world is finally embracing fiber? Is it a broader cultural reckoning with the value of the domestic and handmade? Or has the work of those trailblazers finally forced open the door? Fiber is no longer an afterthought. At Art Basel, it really was kind of the main event. Can you let me know what you think? Is this a trend, a turning point? Is something more profound happening? How about we unravel this? Have you noticed all the embroidery popping up?
Okay. So, what do you guys think about that? I don't pay attention to Art Basel or the Venice Biennale. I can never say that. Simply because people who make the kind of work I make are not represented there. I've never paid attention to those. So when Kate sent me this reel, and I don't know why I wasn't following this woman, because I like her stuff. I like what she has to say. I was like, what? So I don't know if it's a trend or not. I don't know. I hope it's not just a trend. I hope this is a change. But I don't know. It's interesting. And it is good to see women fiber artists being represented, and it seems like there was quite a number of them. A lot of it probably was female artists. But I did see some men in there. So, how many men incorporating fiber and textiles into their work are being represented versus actual things made by women? I'm very interested because, Stanford Biggers, she mentions, and, I've talked about him before, and I like his work, but he is not making fiber art. He is making sculpture that utilizes fiber art. So, and some of those other artists, I like Sheila Hicks, I'm familiar with. Some of the others I'm not really super familiar with, and so I'd have to look back at them. But yeah, this is the stuff the inquiring minds want to know. Yeah. Mario Dim says, guessing most people didn't grow up with needlepoint and embroidery framed and hanging on every wall of the house. Yes. Yeah, it's just such an interesting thing, to see. And, they're great. Like American Craft Magazine, I was a member of American Craft Council for a long time. I read the magazine from the time I was probably 16. And there's lots of fiber art in there. But that, again, is this very narrow window in the art world. So this kind of stuff like Art Basel and Art Basel's like Art Basel's quite international too. I don't want to say like that's U.S. art and then the Venice thing is international, because they both are kind of international. Anyway, long story short, inquiring minds. I'm interested in this, and I'd like to see more of what she has to say, and what other people have to say. So yeah, and that's the thing about us, the quilt nerds. So many of us grew up with something, whether it was hobbyist type of needlework or, needlework that was being made for actual use, decorative needlework. And, it's just something that, my case, and I think I speak for a lot of you, it's in your blood, so in my case, wanting to be an artist, like that's how I express myself, is through needle and thread. And I don't think that, the expressions of, through needle and thread are really any different than expressions through a paintbrush and paint. So yeah, Stay tuned for more. All right, so the other thing, I mentioned this the other day when Jill and I did our little stitch and glitch, but I had forgotten to bring the whole thing to my desk. So check it out. It is, fold this so I can show you. This is the reproduction of this. A friend of ours had told us, or told me, that this fabric, this Victorian cheater, it's a crazy quilt cheater cloth. I'd had this folded so I can show you the side by side. So here you can see, this is kind of my favorite. This little frog, the little toads or frogs, whatever they are. They say, "Fine evening, sir." And here we have it here. But you can see, if you look, things are just a tiny bit different. Just a tiny bit different. Like, see that pink? That pink with those squares? It's different. This is the old one. This is the new one. Obviously, but look at the dice. That's the same. You can see above the dice are two different. You know, what you see in there is different. I can get my finger down there now. So it's really interesting. I want to spread them out kind of and look and see, you know, what are the differences in these? Because some of the things, I mean, they just look like, let me see. Try to fold this. So you see the spider, right? And then the spider. You know, they're very similar. This polka dotty fabric is in here, and this, see, there's like a floral fabric in there, but they seem to have like put them in different places. So it's really interesting. I'm really fascinated. Now, here's the problem. I still don't know what company reproduced this fabric. Because this piece that I bought off of a seller on eBay, who, by the way, had it stored with something delicious smelling. It smells like a Yankee Candle Company. This part of the selvage is there. This part of the selvage where the company may have been listed is not. So if anybody knows who reproduced this, please let me know. I've done, you know, I haven't done like hardcore research. I'm sure if I spent a day on it, I'd find it, but I often don't have time for that. So anyway, that was an exciting thing that came. It was a happy mail day when I got that from eBay. So did I make any more headway on my weaving? No. Because we closed down the stream, and I went directly and made dinner, and then was like, yeah, I've got other things to do. So it is sitting over on my table. Yeah, next time I have some downtime, some not doing much time, I'll jump back on it. So one thing I want to show you. So let's see, we looked at Carrie Scott Curates. Now here's something. Now we did finish, we're getting into Heritage of Cotton. We finished the chapter on India, and I was really interested to see, you know, what is there in India? And I started searching some of the types of art, the textiles that are coming out of India, and I found what is really cool: the Calico Museum of Textiles and the Sarabi Foundation collections. So let me go to my other screen again so you can see this. So it looks like they don't really have much of their collections here online. I'll show you the galleries in a second, but it looks like this really lovely place where there's a garden tour that you can go on. And, you know, they have all of these beautiful textiles. Where in India is this? It's in India. So it's located in the Shambhag area of Ahmedabad. So here are the galleries. And you can see like there's paintings and sculptures and things. But they do have a lot of these textile things. Here's embroidery. I guess this is like some sort of like I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily call it an altar, but it's like kind of like a niche, and it looks like there's stuff in here. And this would be from the Jain tradition versus the Hindu tradition. This was textile techniques. Oh my gosh, I would love to go in there and see this. Looks like there's a loom. There's different types of looms here. There's different looks like maybe swatches and design stuff on the walls. Block making and printing techniques. This looks really fun, interesting. And then this, I guess, is kind of the courtyard here. And then look at these textiles. So this is textiles for the Mughal and regional courts. So, I mean, you just think like picture, I don't know, these sort of, draped tapestries and things. It just seems like very opulent and lush. Export textiles. Look at that chintz, that tree. That looks very familiar to the quilters that are into chintz. And then all of these costumes and embroideries. Oh, can you imagine being able to look at this stuff and just, put your face right up to it? And then this tie-dye textiles. Morris Crawford talked about, these very briefly about these different types of textile manipulations. The tie-dyeing, and the dyeing and embroidery and stuff. So I thought this was really, really interesting to learn about a museum I didn't know. So if you want to look at these a little bit closer, I'll put this in the chat. And if you're ever in India and stop by this place, let me know. I do know there are textile tours of places, all over the world, of course, but particularly I know that there was a textile tour, if it was last year or if it was in 2023, that some people I know were on, and they learned, they went to one of these workshops and learned, the block printing for, that they used to do chintz, those, I guess, carved wooden blocks, and then also the ones that have the metal in them to make the fine lines and stuff. So very cool. Voice, stay with me. So before we get to our chapter on Europe, I wanted to read you a few little snippets from The Empire of Cotton by Sven Beckert. I've just started to read a few things in it. It's a pretty big, dense book, very readable. So I thus far recommend it. I think he's a credible writer. He does have a way with words the way Morris does. Now, I have yet to see any homoerotica in here, but he does have this sort of beautiful way of writing about, the ancient cotton cultivation, use, and so on. So there's a couple of passages I wanted to read. And what is really enlightening, I guess, or what makes me happy is that it seems to be that Morris Crawford's writings from 1924, definitely there's like nothing that I've seen so far that like debunks anything that Morris Crawford said. I feel like what I've seen thus far in Sven Beckert's book is that he's, it's following the same timeline, but he's added things in. So I don't remember seeing anything or thus far, or in my skipping through, that Morris Crawford in The Heritage of Cotton said about Africa, cultivation of cotton in Africa. Yet Sven Beckert, he does talk about, the very specific places in Africa where cotton cultivation was noted. So I think for the most part, we can be safe in what we're reading with Morris Crawford. I don't think that, there's a whole lot that, other than some things that have, discoveries that have been made recently in archaeology and in anthropology. I think that he was his research was solid. And the research that, people that did before him that he was following on were pretty solid. And also thinking about Morris Crawford's attitude towards woven cotton. Remember, he calls it a web. He calls the fabric a web. And I just love that. So I wanted to read you a couple of these passages from Sven Beckert. I'm going to keep calling him Sven Eckert for some reason. And hopefully I'm not going to get any copyright dings. They're just a few little passages, so I'm not reading this book, in its entirety. So, and again, the little passages I'm going to read are from Empire of Cotton, which was written in, it's not long ago. Let's see, 2014. So it's 10 years old. So this is chapter 1. And this is called The Rise of a Global Commodity. And there's a little picture here of an Aztec woman spinning cotton. So, and I know we've looked at some things in Morris's book, terrible pictures, but we've seen some stuff like this. So, chapter 1, The Rise of a Global Commodity. This is the first batch of paragraphs in this chapter. Half a millennium ago, in a dozen small villages along the Pacific coast of what is today called Mexico, Morris talked about Peru, but Sven's adding Mexico in there. People spent their days growing maize, beans, squash, and chilies. There, between the Rio Santiago to the north and the Rio Balsas to the south, they fished, gathered oysters and clams, and collected honey and beeswax. Alongside this subsistence agriculture and the modest crafts they produced by hand, small painted ceramic vessels decorated with geometric motifs, remember, Morris showed us those, were their most renowned creation. These men and women also grew a plant that sprouted small tufted white bolls. The plant was inedible. It was also the most valuable thing they grew. They called it textile, cotton. The cotton plant thrived among the maize, and each fall, after they harvested their food crops, the villagers plucked the soft wads of fiber from the pyramidally. Sven likes the difficult words as well as Morris. From the pyramidally shaped waist-high plants, gathering the numerous bolls in baskets or sacks, then carrying them to their mud and wattle huts. There they painstakingly remove the many seeds by hand, which I have done, then beat the cotton on a palm mat to make it smooth. That's something that's interesting. We hadn't seen that before. Before combing out the fibers. So they're beating it first, they're removing the seeds, and then they're beating it, which I don't know what purpose that has. I guess. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to try that and see what the difference is. And then comb the fibers into strands several inches long. Using a thin wooden spindle fitted with a ceramic disc and a spinning bowl to support the spindle as it twirled, they twisted the strands together into fine white thread. Then they created cloth on a backstrap loom, a simple tool consisting of 2 sticks attached by the warp threads. One stick was hung from a tree, the other on the weaver herself, who stretched the warp with the weight of her own body, and then wove the contrasting thread, the weft, in and out between the warps in an unending dance. The result was a cloth as strong as it was supple. They dyed the cloth with indigo and cochineal, creating a rich variety of blue, blacks, and crimsons. Some of the cloth they wore themselves, sewn into shirts, skirts, and trousers. The rest they sent to Teotihuacan. I really wish those Aztec words could roll off my tongue. They simply do not. As part of an annual tribute owed to their distant Aztec rulers. In 1518 alone, the people of these 12 coastal villages provided the Emperor Montezuma II with 800 bales of raw cotton, each weighing 115 pounds, 3,200 colored cotton cloths, and 4,800 large white cloths, the product of thousands of hours of backbreaking and highly skilled labor. Fascinating. There's this is the same chapter, The Rise of a Global Commodity. Evidence of cotton's essential role in early societies can be found in the foundational myths and sacred texts of many peoples. In Hindu scripture, cotton appears frequently and prominently. Vishnu, Hindus believe, wove the rays of the sun into a garment for himself. People across West Africa attributed their spinning skills to Anansi, yes, I'm pronouncing that right, a spider deity. In North America, a Hopi spider goddess was believed to spin and weave cotton. Now, isn't that interesting? The spider being, a symbol of weaving. That goes back to, is it Athena? My Greek gods and goddesses I'm not good with, but I believe it was Athena, is the goddess of weaving, and there's some kind of spider situation going on with her. So we've got the spider deity in Africa. We've got a spider goddess in early America with the Hopis. And we've got, Greek gods and goddesses, deities, that have also that same connection. So, these are cropping up throughout many different millennia. And we would have to believe that these civilizations had no contact with each other. Perhaps the Greeks and Africa could, but my point being, you've got these belief systems that are cropping up a lot of different places, and they're very similar. So, you're thinking about this yesterday because you caught a spider. Spiders freak me out. I love their work. Just not a fan of them individually. So, in North America, a Hopi spider goddess was believed to spin and weave cotton. The Navajo believed that Begochiti, one of the four sons of ray of sunlight and daylight, had created and planted cotton after making the mountains and insects. According to a Navajo belief, when a baby girl is born to your tribe, you shall go and find a spider web and rub it on the baby's arm and hand. Thus, when she grows up, she will weave, and her fingers and arms will not tire from the weaving. I love that. Although, make sure you find a spider web with no spider on it before you start rubbing spider webs on babies. In China, according to a 1637 text from the late Ming Dynasty, clothing, including cottons, distinguished humans from beasts, and among humans, it distinguished between the rulers and the ruled. So, sumptuary laws. Moreover, the idea of fate as either spun or woven was central to many diverse cultures, including those, not surprisingly, in which cotton played a dominant role. So, yeah, this stuff is so interesting. So, he goes on to say, Mexico and Peru were the centers of pre-Columbian cotton industry, but the production of cotton textiles also spread to other parts of the continent. In what is today Brazil, cotton fibers gathered from the wild plants were used to manufacture cloth. Cotton growing and manufacturing also has a long history in Africa. And so this is one piece that I don't think Morris Crawford touches on. It was probably first cultivated by Nubians in what today is eastern Sudan. Some claim that the fiber was cultivated, spun, and woven there as early as 5000 BCE. So, I think that would coincide with the Egyptian dynasties. So, yeah. And what was really interesting, my bad, again, if I would read one sentence more. Let's see. So Sudan, woven as early as 5000 BCE. It goes on to say, a former city on the east bank of the Nile confirmed the presence of cotton textiles only for the years between 500 BCE and 300 CE. From Sudan, cotton spread north to Egypt. So, this is really interesting. The spread of cotton and its attendant production accelerated further on the wings of Islam. So, we've got a lot of interesting things going on now. Morris Crawford talked about the Crusades, I know. So, and then he provides, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time, I'll scan this. But you can see where he's got these shaded areas that show the worlds of cotton. And it's interesting. So some of these, obviously, Morris Crawford talks about Peru. Spend a lot of time on Peru, a whole chapter. Guyana, Guadeloupe, Hispaniola, the Yucatan Peninsula, and then Mexico. And then over in Europe and Asia, I mean, we've got literally all of China, down into Japan, and then the Sudan and Egypt. And then in West Africa, which really surprised me because, I mean, again, I hadn't read anything about this. We've got Senegal, Burkina Faso, the Ivory Coast, and Togo, which I'm not sure. Is Togo named something different today, or did Togo replace the name of another country? I can't remember. So interesting, right? It's like this Sven Beckert has really fleshed out some stuff here. So, yeah, cotton is really fascinating, and I'm just, we keep finding, or I keep finding really interesting things that I kind of knew, but kind of like just really did not know the details of. So let us, and one other thing I wanted to mention, and I think I looked at this last week, the Brooklyn Museum. So a lot of Morris's references in here, the plates, and I'm not going to show any of them today because they're just so hard to see. But he shows things that are from the American Museum of Natural History because, if you remember, he was a fellow there. Unfortunately, they don't have any of their collection online, but the Brooklyn Museum does. So some of the things, and I think I found one of them that he has here in the book, are also in the Brooklyn Museum. So if you want to look more at stuff, you can go in there and just, Indian tapestry, and you'll find lots of cool stuff. So we are going on to our next chapter, The Heritage of Cotton. We're reading MDC Crawford. It's Morris de Camp Crawford. I like to call him Morris. This book was written in 1924, and we are on chapter 7, which is Europe. Cotton was cultivated on the Greek mainland in the time of Alexander the Great and in the Saracenic Islands of the Mediterranean from the 8th century on. But Spain, under the Moorish caliphs, was the most important early European center of the fiber. On the wings of Islam, right? That's what Sven Beckert said. Tradition runs to the effect that one of the cultured Mohammedan rulers presented a cotton embroidered mantle to Charlemagne of France before 814 AD. It is well established, at least, that in the reign of Abdrahman III, 912 to 961 AD, the arts of cotton cultivation and conversion, together with other Oriental crafts, reached a high distinction in southern Spain. In the ancient cities of Cordova, Seville, and Granada, cotton weaving and dyeing is said to have compared favorably with that of Baghdad and Damascus. The Moors even made paper from cotton long before any other European city understood the art. Today, cotton grows wild in the fields of Valencia in the memory of more gracious times. Barcelona was famous for her rough fustians and sailcloths, and two streets in this ancient city, Cotoners Vel and Cotoners Neus, derived their name from the days when cotton was an important economic factor. Moorish Spain had little contact with Christian Europe because of the almost constant warfare and the bitter religious differences. I did not know that. I mean, I knew about the Islamic influence in southern Spain, but I didn't know that they were kind of cut off. And when the Mohammedans were expelled, their crafts went with them, leaving only a trace behind, although their influence on design was both powerful and persistent. The Oriental commerce and arts, which took root in Italy in the early centuries of the Middle Ages, came directly from Byzantium, Syria, and the Phoenician towns captured by the Crusaders. Before this, there was trade in classical times, which was never wholly interrupted. Whether or not cotton appeared in this dim commerce, we cannot say, but there is no question that the Italian merchant princes were the first to introduce the cotton fiber into Europe generally. Venice is said to have been the first city to have manufactured cotton fabrics, although the earliest record of cotton fiber was in Genoa, where in the year 1140, cotton from Antioch was weighed on the public scales along with the cottons from Alexandria and Sicily. Cotton was grown in early times in Apulia, Crete, Sicily, Cyprus, and Armenia, but the fiber was rated as of lower quality than the Levant or the Indian cottons, which came by way of Alexandria. Cotton fiber was a regular article of commerce between Venice and Ulm as early as 1320 and soon spread to other cities in southern Germany. So Ulm is Germany, right? It was fashioned into cotton and linen and cotton and woolen fabrics. Linsey woolsey, anybody? Remember, I think Mary Kay told us when we read Quilt Making in America on Quilt Nerding, Mary Kay Waldvogel has an article in there, a paper in there about Linsey, not to be confused with Linsey woolsey, but she said cottonsy woolsey, right? I think it was cottonsy woolsey would be a better descriptor because most Linsey woolsey doesn't have linen in it. It's cotton and wool. So it's interesting to see that cotton and woolen fabrics, thousands of years that they've been combined. So cotton and woolen fabrics known as barchents, fustians, rippelect, and gehorti. Unquestionably, in the late Middle Ages, Germany led all Europe in the production of this character of merchandise. Interesting. England in the 14th and 15th centuries imported large quantities of these fabrics, and there was as well an extensive trade between Antwerp and Venice in printed cottons, both of Indian and European manufacture. England alone bought from the cities of Germany in the 15th century 600,000 crowns worth of annually of barchents and fustians. 600,000 crowns. Are they giving a date there? 15th century. Okay. Block printing and perhaps resist dyeing in a single color were known in Europe before the introduction of Indian calico. A few specimens are preserved in European museums of blue and white prints on cotton and linen fabrics of earlier dates. In the 14th century, Italy expelled the Anabaptists, first of the great Protestant sects, and those immigrants helped to build up in Central Europe the body of arts we call today by the misleading term of peasant arts. So the Anabaptists were the people that went from, they're Protestants, so they're moving into parts of Germany, Martin Luther and parts of Eastern Europe. And then some of those people, a couple hundred years later, come to the U.S. So we've got the Schwenkfelders, and we've got people that ended up, becoming the Amish and the Mennonites. So it's interesting. And we talk about Pennsylvania Dutch and that desire to decorate everything. And the peasant arts of Eastern Europe are very, very similar. There are lots of decor. Decorative surfaces, not just in textiles. Let's see. So we know these people were skilled printers of cotton and linen fabrics and to have imitated in prints the blue and white embroideries of Italy. I am inclined to believe that the blue and white prints were a reminiscence of earlier Eastern contact through classical Italy. It seems difficult to associate this form of expression with the multicolored calicos of the 17th century. In earliest forms of Europe, carved wooden blocks for printing on fabric we possess are, however, obviously copies in form and design of the Oriental prototypes of the 16th century. I mean, if we remember this from Chintz, the Chintz book, MacIver Percival basically told us, there was this push and pull between England and, all of its colonial exploits and India, with the imports and the embargoes. So that's what he's getting into here. So they're obviously copies. They're irregular in size and shape, and each one is a complete unit. Later, the wood engravers and etchers of Europe influenced the printers of fabrics, and we find rectangular stamps carved in complete and rigid patterns composed of many units. The last phase, and the one still in use, consists of a number of blocks, each carved in the details of a single color, and all so carefully related as by successive printings to produce many colored designs. I should just stop commenting because I believe Morris is going to get into what I just said. The Anabaptists were the ancestors of our Mennonite Quakers who brought to Pennsylvania a knowledge of glassmaking, glazed pottery, weaving of double cloth coverlets, and the printing from wood blocks on fabrics. And we may still discern in these modest colonial arts a reflective loveliness of the cultured races of antiquity. If only I could have met Morris. I think we would have been great friends. A list of the cloth printing establishments in Europe and England will give some idea of the importance of the cotton trade in the 17th and 18th centuries. Plants were founded in Augsburg in 1688, in Richmond near London in 1690, in Neuchâtel in 1716, in Schwechat near Vienna in 1726, in Glasgow in 1732, in Hamburg in 1737. Oh gosh, I think this is probably, it's either Austrian or Polish. In Schopau, I don't know. Schopau. I don't think it should start with a Z, but Schopau in 1740. Also in Schleswig and something Prussia. In Berlin in 1741. In Mulhausen in 1746. In Plauen in Vogtland in 1750. In Westerling in Els in 1760. In Grossenhain in Okay. In this place in 1763. In Preston near Manchester in 1764. Also in Lancashire in Heidenheim, Brenz in 1766. In Chemnitz in 1770. In Joy in 1776. In Kosmanos in Bohemia in 1778. And in Iwanowo. In Russia in 1780. These plants were obviously the result of the trade with India. I don't know if we needed that whole paragraph. Such skill in fabric printing as existed in Europe before the introduction of Indian chintzes and calicos was simple in pattern and in a single color. Our ancestors used woad, a plant containing a weak dye not unlike indigo in chemical reaction, and in earlier times, perhaps the juice of the Mediterranean shellfish that produced the royal purple of Tyre. Indigo was discovered by Marco Polo in 1300 and was probably introduced into Europe a little later in small quantities. In the 17th century, there are records of very large shipments which indicate that the cotton and linen industry and dyeing and printing had become very extensive in Europe. Indian madder, that's M-A-D-D-E-R, was used from classical times to produce red, and after the conquest of Mexico, the cochineal insect was imported and later raised in Africa and the Near East. So I guess the cochineal, the little beetle, is indigenous to at least Central America, if not Southern North America. I'm guessing it's more Central America, South America. So that's interesting that it went from like here to Africa in the East. I don't know why I always think of like dyeing with insects as being something that's like, you know, very ancient and not of the New World. After the voyage of da Gama in Calcutta in 1497, Portugal built up at once a large and profitable trade with the Indies, including cotton and cotton fabrics. 1497. We know what the Portuguese and the Dutch were up to. They were dragging the English in and doing all of their evil deeds. The Dutch traded with Lisbon, and in this way, Antwerp, Bruges, and Haarlem became the most important cotton ports of northern Europe, and the old industries revived. Indeed, they were vastly stimulated by the rich colored chintzes and calicos, which formed a part of each shipment from the east. We do not know much about the manufacture of cotton in Portugal itself, although maybe Sven Beckert does. But it is beyond question that the art of block printing grew up among these people and even affected in some degree the arts of India. Spain, after the conquest of Mexico and Peru, found in her vast possessions of the West sufficient scope for her restless energy. So for almost a century, the descendants of Henry the Navigator monopolized the cotton trade in the Far East. A few Dutch adventurers and Dutch captains of Spanish vessels began to voyage among the islands of the eastern seas, carrying on a more or less illicit trade, bordering often on open piracy. Spain resented this bitterly because of her religious and political differences with Holland, and finally forbade Dutch trade with Lisbon. But the seven seas were then, as now, a rather wide area over which to enforce authority, and the men who had met with stubborn courage the armed might of Spain were difficult to impress with royal edicts. Well, pirates are going to be like, pirates are going to do piracy. They don't care what the kings of Europe have to say. They combined to defend themselves from Spanish vessels of war. Then Spain, mad with ambition, committed national suicide, and the British guns, before which the mighty armada crumbled into helpless, pitiful wrecks. Oh, here he goes with the flowery language. Opened the ports of the East to the merchant adventurers of two rising maritime people. The Dutch merchant adventurers eventually amalgamated in 1602 into one company under the title the Dutch East India Company. In 1587, Drake seized the St. Philip, a Portuguese carrack from the East Indies, and English privateers in 1592 captured the Madre de Dios, the Mother of God, and in her cargo discovered calicos, lawns, quilts, and carpets and other rich commodities, and no doubt bills of lading of such value that English adventurers realized the immense wealth to be obtained through direct contact with India. Maybe that's why we should just go colonialize them. English adventurers. So a memorial was presented to Queen Elizabeth in 1599, and in 1600 a charter granted to the first British East India Company. This does not mean that the English preceded the Dutch as traders in the East Indies. There is no doubt that the Dutch mariners were the first in these seas after the Portuguese. He was a poet and he didn't know it. The first in these seas after the Portuguese. Cotton is mentioned in France in the 15th century as padding for armor. We remember how, oh gosh, why am I blanking on her name? We read her book early this year, I guess. Avril Colby. Avril Colby was the one who spent so much time on quilted armor in her book Quilting. So, in the 15th century France, as padding for armor and for some vague millinery purposes, also for hairnets, and was sometimes perhaps used in the rough cloths mixed with linen, I have mentioned as being made in southern Germany. The French East India Company was formed in 1664, more than half a century later than the Dutch and the English. The introduction of painted calicos and chintzes of the East met in French markets in the 17th century, a vigorous resistance from the manufacturers of silk and wool. Remember, at least the wool people of England were like super pissed. They were like, no, homegrown. We need to capitalize on our industry and not these imported things. Stringent laws were passed in a measure enforced, and yet it is apparent that in spite of these prohibitions, and maybe because of them, there was a dangerous demand for the forbidden wares. In Molière's Les Bourgeois Gentilhommes, the tailor, attempting to ape the habits of the gentleman, remarks that fashionable people wear chintz dressing gowns in the morning. Early in the 18th century, it was estimated that 20 million francs were spent annually on Oriental calicos and German and perhaps Italian imitations. At this time, there were no printers in France able to make fast calicos, although there was a forbidden traffic in fugitive pigment colors. Prussia had similar prohibitive laws in effect until a calico plant was erected in Berlin in 1741. Ah, here's a name that you are going to be familiar with from the Chintz book. In 1758, Christoph Philipp Oberkampf, son of a dyer in Weizenbond, settled in Paris and entered into partnership with an M. Cottin, Cottin, who up to that time had never been successful in printing fabrics in fast colors. Oberkampf began at once the printing of calicos in fast tints, and so successful was he and other printers that in 1759 all restrictions in regard to the domestic trade were removed. In 1776, Oberkampf formed the new partnership of Saracen Desmarais at Oberkampf and established at Joy, a little town near Versailles, his famous printing works. So that's exciting when we see something we've already learned. We know at least these people all referenced the same information. Very rapidly, the beauty and excellence of these fabrics attracted buyers from all over Europe, including England. Oberkampf was a great favorite of Marie Antoinette, and in 1787, the unhappy Louis XVI, right? XVI, that's Louis XVI, right? Yes. Louis XVI conferred upon him letters of nobility. By shrewd direction and very skillful manipulation of the laws of exchange in assignats, he kept his organization intact during the period of the Revolution and survived the period of Reconstruction successfully. I think that's a big deal, right? I think for things to have, maintained industry during the French Revolution. In 1806, Napoleon and the Empress Josephine visited his works, and Napoleon decorated him with his own Cross of the Legion of Honor. In 1809, Oberkampf received first prize for his contributions in science and art in the following citation. M. Oberkampf began his establishment 50 years ago and naturalized in France the art of painted cotton, which had been built up in Europe from very modest beginnings. M. Oberkampf elevated his manufacture to a great degree of prosperity. He brought perfection in all phases of the industry, be it by the application of chemistry or mechanical processes. Among the new processes should be recognized the engraving of cylinders and plates of copper, the impression of a solid green in a single application, and the use of steam in the process of dyeing. Yay! Oberkampf. Once again in 1810, the great Corsican visited this father of the French textile printing arts and planned with him a joint war against the English. Okay. We will make together, said the conqueror of Austerlitz, a rude war against the English. You by your industries and I by my armies. All right, Napoleon. Most of these famous prints were in single colors, stamped from engraved copper plates. Later, the cylinder printing of England was introduced, but did not fit the genius of the French workmen so perfectly as the more artistic method. These brief comments are little more than a hasty sketch of the history of cotton in continental Europe. I have done scant justice to the arts of the great industrial and cultural significance. Of the greatest industrial and cultural significance. There is no doubt that in the 18th century, and perhaps even before, the vigorous, realistic expression of Europe, born of the Renaissance, strongly affected the styles of Indian printing. There is no question that France achieved a higher distinction in her own inimitable, I can't say that word either, inimitable fabrics than I have suggested. The supremacy of French handcraft looms and in printed cottons of distinction today implies a greater share in the artistic history of the fiber. If we owe much to India, and this debt is beyond question, we owe almost as much equal debt to the French craftsmen who have kept alive the beauty of texture, design, and color in cotton. France unquestionably borrowed technology and chemistry from England and Germany, but this debt has been more than repaid by the sustained artistry and traditional good taste of her craft designers. Other factors, however, make it seem wiser to continue the story of calicos and cottons in the history of that nation most concerned in the lighter commerce and technology of the fiber. Well, guess who that is. In the great Elizabethan age, the vigorous mariners of England began that series of audacious voyages and expeditions and conquering colonialism, which in a short century placed the commerce of the world in their control. French, Portuguese, and Dutch adventurers still played important parts in their Indian dominions, but to England fell the chief role. So the next century and a half of cotton history becomes merely a detail in the growth of the British Empire. And that is our chapter on Europe. So let's see. England, I believe, is a pretty long chapter. So I'm not going to start it today. But I know I said I wasn't going to really look at the plates, but this is a plate from the English chapter. And so you can see we're getting into stuff that looks very familiar historically. We're getting into, a period of time where, we're getting into North America, and what's happening there. So, I'm going to end there. You guys, this was the last stream for me of 2024. And like I said, 2024, don't let the door hit you on the way out. I have great hopes for 2025. Yeah, I have, again, so many things going on in my little brain. Just so lots of things written down, lots of sketches. I want to sit down and kind of do some good planning to know what this year will look like. Jill has seriously influenced me with doing the calendar for quilt nerding. I'm like, I need to do that for my stream as well. So you guys know it's coming, what we're up to. So that said, I think we're going to end up ending quite early today. My voice is being a little, I definitely think I have what my husband has. And as Jill said, much better than what my child had, which was the barfy, the barfy illness. I just have my husband's congestion. So hopefully this is short-lived. He's feeling much better today than he was the other day. So fingers crossed. We are going out to dinner tonight to celebrate our anniversary, because we go nowhere on our actual anniversary. Because people are celebrating, they're celebrating something bigger than us. So, yeah. And I'm going to look into scheduling a little private viewing of that little documentary about Robert Rauschenberg and the Venice Biennale. And yeah, we're going to have lots of fun in 2025. That is my plan. So I will be back on Thursday. So next year. That was always my favorite thing when I was a kid, to end of the year, say goodbye to somebody that you're not going to see for a while and to be like, see you next year. Yes, I am a dork. So, Happy New Year, guys. I look forward to a great 2025. I really appreciate you guys here in 2024 and 2023. I would not still be doing this if it wasn't for you guys. You are, yeah. Oh, Robin. I remember you said that the other day. I think you're the only one not sick. Stay that way. Oh, you're poor Stephanie. My goodness. Yeah. Yes. 2025, a year of ease. I like that. I love that, Robin. I always think about that.